Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Mr. B. We are now tracking the latest development in the Iran war, and unfortunately, it's not getting better. If anything, it's getting worse as tensions continue to rise. The ceasefire 60-day timeline has expired, and it's likely that the battle will continue. Not to mention, Israel is taking steps to expand their attacks. They've attacked Syria and, have had attacks on Lebanon. So it seems like there's the likeliness that there may be a regional war. We all have to be prayerful. But that being said, let's jump into First Post to catch some of the latest developments.
Does the sea for Indians? We ask because in just a matter of 4 days, 2 commercial ships have been hijacked off the coast of Yemen and Somalia. In separate incidents, and on both occasions, Indians were in danger, 22 to be specific. These weren't any warships. These are not soldiers fighting in the war. They're merchant seafarers doing their job. And now they're in the hands of armed pirates. The first incident happened on the 20th of August. A US-sanctioned vessel was seized in the Gulf of Aden after 6 armed men boarded the ship and forced it to change course towards Somalia. The Seamerl tanker, also known as Cebu 1, issued distress calls as it was approached 136 nautical miles east of Al-Mukalla in Yemen. All 20 crew members were reported safe, according to a report prepared by the Directorate of Maritime Administration, although the latest status of the vessel and crew is awaited. It is a sanctioned vessel. The US sanctioned it in December last year after accusing it of being part of Iran's shadow fleet, which exports Iranian oil using allegedly deceptive shipping practices. It is one of 4 vessels operated by a UAE-based ship management company that transported Iranian petroleum products on multiple occasions and made port calls to Houthi-controlled ports in Yemen. Just 3 days prior, on the 17th of August, another commercial vessel was hijacked, this time off Puntland, Somalia. The Cameroon-flagged vessel called Lutuf was seized about 3.5 nautical miles from Maraya, in Somalia's Ail district. On board, 10 crew members, including 6 Indians. The ship was heading for Dar es Salaam when it was captured. The pirates were able to board before its armed guards could shoot. Interestingly, the vessel was reportedly carrying Turkish weapons, communications equipment, and satellite equipment bound for a Turkish military training facility in Mogadishu. But the status of the vessel and the cargo remains unclear. Somali pirates reportedly used a previously hijacked ship to seize their target. It's a tactic that was used often during the height of Somali piracy in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Remember, piracy was rampant off the coast of Somalia in the 2000s and peaked in 2011 before being curbed by international naval deployments and new security measures for commercial shipping. But attacks have surged again since April, with 5 cargo ships currently held hostage. A new group of pirates from the semi-autonomous Puntland region have reportedly led the resurgence of attacks on shipping. But with the spate of hijackings, India's message on its citizens was clear. All 22 Indian nationals aboard the 2 vessels were safe. The Ministry of External Affairs says it is in touch with the authorities concerned to ensure their safety and well-being.
ये 2 जहाज आपने ठीक कहा, 2 जहाज है। ये एक दोनों जहाज, इन दोनों जहाज जो कि विदेशी मतलब विदेशी फ्लैग्ड हैं, उनके ऊपर किसी और के झंडा लगा हुआ है, किसी और देश, दूसरे देश का। उसमें भारतीय नागरिक नाविक हैं 22, एक में 16, दूसरे में 6। ये जो हम लोग को अभी तक पता चला है कि वो 22 जो नागरिक हमारे हैं, जो हमारे नाविक हैं, सुरक्षित हैं, और जो अधिकारीगण हैं उनसे हम इस मामले पर उनसे हम जुड़े हुए हैं ताकि हम अपने लोगों को उनकी सुरक्षा, उनका देखभाल कर सकें।
The Indian government's assurance comes as immediate relief, but it does not answer the bigger question. Why are Indian seafarers finding themselves in the line of fire again and again? Because look at where these ships were hijacked, the Gulf of Aden and the waters of Yemen and Somalia. The very same maritime corridors that have already been thrown into chaos by the war in the region and by attacks on commercial shipping. The US Maritime Administration had already warned that the piracy threat in the Gulf of Aden, Arabian Sea, and Indian Ocean had increased in 2026. In its July advisory, it said that since March, there had been 4 reported hijackings and 17 boarding or armed robbery incidents in the region. It recorded 16 attacks involving firearms. But this is a much bigger problem than just 2 hijacking incidents. India is one of the world's largest pools of merchant seafarers. India is the world's...
Have you ever wanted to see your home from space? With this free satellite Earth Maps tool, you can zoom right down to your exact address in just seconds. Imagine pulling up your neighborhood, spotting your roof, your street, even the landmarks around you, all in real time from an aerial view. It's like having your own personal window to the world right on your screen. This tool is simple to use. Just type in an address and instantly explore detailed satellite imagery with incredible clarity and precision. Whether you're curious about your home, checking out a vacation spot, or just exploring places you've always wanted to visit, it's all right here. Discover the power of seeing your world from above. Don't just hear about it, experience it. Try this free satellite Earth Maps tool today and see your world like never before.
At the time, more than 15,000 Indian seafarers were reportedly stranded west of Hormuz. That was a July figure, not a current count. So it just shows the scale of the problem. The data is impossible to ignore. Indian seafarers are already paying a price for wars they did not start. Add piracy to that equation, and you have a situation in which Indians are sailing through some of the most dangerous waters on earth. The world depends on these men and women to keep global trade moving. They carry oil, they carry gas, food, and machinery around the world. These are the things that keep economies running. They say that the 22 Indians caught in the 2 pirate hijackings are safe, and that is good news. But the question we want to ask is this: how many more have to become collateral damage of the world's wars before their safety becomes a global security priority? The bonhomie between Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is no secret. The two even call each other dearest friends and closest comrades. But that bond is now going beyond diplomacy. Reports say North Korea sent more troops to Russia, including elite drone squads, combat engineers, and infantrymen. Kim Jong-un has reportedly also sent ballistic missiles. Now, this is not the first time such deployments have come to light. North Korea has previously sent its troops to fight Russia's war in Ukraine. What was considered a one-time deployment is now evolving into a trend. So if Putin is getting drone operators and missiles, what is in store for Kim Jong-un? Our next report has all the details.
With the Russia-Ukraine war now in its 5th year, both Moscow and Kyiv are turning to allies for support. Ukraine now heavily relies on Western nations like France, Sweden, the US, and the UK for intelligence, weapons, and carrying out deep strikes inside Russia. On the other hand, Russian President Vladimir Putin is turning to his allies, like China and North Korea. In recent times, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has stepped up his engagements with Putin. The two leaders have met at least 3 times since Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2022. North Korea has previously sent its troops to Russia, and they were allegedly involved in a major ground offensive in Russia's western region of Kursk. The deployments reportedly took place through October 2024 to early 2025. As per reports, Pyongyang sent between 10 to 15,000 soldiers, and they allegedly fought alongside Russian troops against the Ukrainians. And now it looks like another North Korean deployment is on its way. That is what Ukrainian military intelligence claims. They've alleged that North Korea is sending a new batch of almost 8,000 troops to Russia. And the contingent supposedly comprises of 1,000 combat engineers, troops that can repair machines and weapons. Joining them are around 400 drone operators who've been specially trained to carry out long-range drone attacks, while the remaining contingent comprises of infantry soldiers. Ukraine claims that along with the engineers and elite drone squads, North Korea is also sending more ballistic missiles. This includes the KN-30, also known as the Hwasong-11, a short-range ballistic missile that can strike targets up to 900 kilometers away. The warhead can reach hypersonic speeds, which is more than 5 times the speed of sound in its final stage. As per Ukraine, at least 6 North Korean launchers for the KN-30 or the Hwasong-11 are already in Russia, along with a dedicated crew of 90 missile technicians and operators. So, if North Korea is sending its troops and missiles to Russia, what is Pyongyang getting in return? The deputy head of Ukrainian military intelligence claims that Moscow is paying back the favor by supplying air defense systems to Pyongyang, particularly the short-ranged Pantsir-1 and the longer-ranged S-400. Additionally, several reports claim that Putin is also giving military technology to Kim Jong-un, which includes identifying and fixing flaws in North Korea's weapons, including warships, submarines, and missiles. Meanwhile, North Korea has refuted Ukraine's allegations. Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, put out an official statement accusing Ukraine of fabricating baseless claims. Despite Pyongyang's denials, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged Western allies and South Korea to look into the possible North Korean deployments. However, the irony is hard to ignore. NATO members like France, the UK, the US, and Sweden routinely give aid and weapons to Ukraine. But when Russian allies send weapons and military support to Putin, Kyiv and its allies are quick to cry foul. For now, there are just reports of North Korea sending troops and drone squads in return for air defense systems and technology. But it remains to be seen if Moscow and Pyongyang will find more ways to deepen their relations.
Is Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan finally ready to make peace with the man he once called a dictator? Because a remarkable new message has just come out of Imran Khan's camp. If Khan is released, he would not confront Pakistan's military. And that means, after years of bitter confrontation, after Khan's party blamed the military for his removal from power, and after Khan himself repeatedly targeted Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir, is Pakistan now witnessing the beginning of a thaw? In an interview on Wednesday, Khan's aide, Zulfikar Bukhari, a spokesperson from Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party, sent one of the strongest signals so far that the party was willing to reconcile with the military. Listen to this.
If Imran Khan was released tomorrow, hypothetically, he wouldn't do anything that would effectively damage the country. And if that doesn't mean you go loggerheads with the establishment, with the military leader, you do everything in your power, you control your own hurt, you curb your own pain, you swallow it for the betterment of your country.
Bukhari, once a mainstay by Khan's side in Islamabad, now is in self-imposed exile in Dubai. He's far from alone. Following a sweeping state crackdown on the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party, dozens of top leaders have been driven into hiding, locked behind bars, or forced to cross borders. So the fact that he's even remotely signaling a thaw in ties with the military is remarkable, to say the least. It's a complete U-turn from the story that has defined Imran Khan's party for years. At the absolute center of Pakistan's political turmoil has been the bitter personal feud between the deposed Prime Minister and the head of the military, Field Marshal Asim Munir. Rewind back to 2022, when Imran Khan was removed as Prime Minister after losing a parliamentary no-confidence vote. He was arrested in 2023 and has remained in prison since. Khan and his party have repeatedly accused the military establishment of targeting him politically. The government and military have denied interfering in politics and say Khan's legal cases are matters for the courts. Khan, meanwhile, has remained defiant. In past comments, Khan has called Munir the most tyrannical dictator in history and mentally unstable. Khan supporters have for years rallied against Munir, who is seen by them as...
This is my team, and we get everything done with Monday.com. This is Josh, our project lead, who used to have too many projects.
Khan himself has said that he would neither bow down nor submit. So when his close aide now talks about Munir extending a healing hand, questions are going to be asked. Like, has jail time made Imran Khan soften his stance on the Pakistani military? Now, Imran Khan has not personally come out and said that he is ready to reconcile with Munir. But the PTI spokesperson's comments came after Pakistan's top court ordered Khan to be moved to hospital for treatment. The order came amid growing concerns over Khan's health and his access to medical care. The court also directed that a multidisciplinary medical board exam be conducted and allowed greater access for his family. That ruling was seen by some as a possible opening for de-escalation. But then Khan was returned to prison after a much shorter than expected hospital visit. Pakistan's government said he was medically fit, but Khan's party has accused the Shehbaz Sharif government of violating the Supreme Court's directions. And a massive nationwide protest by Khan's party is still scheduled for September. All of this reminds us of an old saying: politics makes strange bedfellows. Imran Khan originally climbed to the apex of power by cozying up to Pakistan's powerful military. He then fell out of their favor, triggering years of bitter confrontation. And now, facing the walls of a prison cell, it appears that he is willing to play that very same card once again, just to rescue himself from political irrelevancy.
Okay, so I got a couple of comments on the last two segments that was played here. The first segment being with Russia helping Iran with supplying them weapons and things of that nature, and also with Kim Jong-un helping Russia in the war against Ukraine, and how Ukraine is crying foul, even though they're getting help from NATO countries. It's just, war is a horrible thing. But it's true, it is a bit hypocritical if you are openly receiving help from other countries, for the country that's fighting you to not have the same right would seem a little off. So I don't think it's to me a foul. I think it's really kind of a sign that the war needs to end sooner rather than later. But for those who make the case that somehow, North Korea is out of place for choosing to help who they deem is an ally, I don't know that I would buy that argument, given the fact that the other side is getting assistance from their allies. So that's interesting. But also, moving on to the story with regards to the dynamics in India, in Pakistan, it appears as if the gentleman who's been in jail, Imran Khan, has been there for quite some time, and he's been sort of kept in there unjustly and unfairly, because he is at odds with, I guess, the ruling man, the head of the military, and because of that, the politics of it gets kicked into play. They're using their power to punish him for being a critic of theirs, and unfortunately, his health is deteriorating as a result of it. And this brings up the question about what your convictions are in life and the consequences tied to each of those convictions. Now, this man, is not really in good conditions. A former president, a guy who was highly, celebrated as a cricket player in that country, is now kind of being treated like scum, really. This brings me to a scripture that Paul said, when he abounds, he remains the same, and when he abases, he remains the same. Meaning, when he's eating with kings at the table, he's the same man, and when he's in a jail eating the slop that they serve him, he's the same man. And it seems like that's sort of the story with this guy, Imran Khan, as he continues to be a leading voice against the powers that be over there in Pakistan. How this plays out, we don't know, but we can only pray that the tensions in all these different countries will diminish and that peace can be found amongst all parties. All right, let's move on.
America's universities have long been one of the country's biggest global advantages, but that is now showing signs of cracking. International applications to US colleges have fallen by around 10%, and the biggest drop in at least a decade. Indian applications alone are down 14%, and it comes as Trump administration tightens student visa rules. As the cost of an American education has soared, 16 universities will now cost more than $100,000 a year. So why are international students looking elsewhere? And could America be losing more than just students? Here's our report.
America once knew how to bet on brains. Now it's folding the hand. The year was 1945. The Second World War was ending, and a government report landed with a warning. American research, the kind that built radar, that cracked codes, that would soon split the atom for peaceful use, was starving for support. Washington's answer wasn't a shrug. It was a flood of cash into universities. The result? Decades of dominance. At its peak, international students alone were pumping in over $40 billion a year in America's economy. Fast forward to today, same warning, opposite response. The numbers, released this week by Common App, are brutal. International applications to US colleges are down roughly 10%. This is the steepest drop in at least a decade. Nearly 16,000 fewer foreign students in the pipeline than last year. And this isn't a random dip. Break it down by region and it gets worse. Indian applications, one of the largest sources of international students in the US, have fallen 14%. Other large source markets also saw a decline, including Canada, China, Pakistan, South Korea, Ethiopia, and Ghana. One of the primary reasons behind the fall is US President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. Visas have become harder to get, and students increasingly want easier and more viable options. Enter France and Germany. Both countries have rolled out the red carpet for students who've decided Uncle Sam isn't worth the visa headache anymore. And it's not just visa problems anymore, there's also the cost factor that you need to look into. 16 American colleges now cost more than $100,000 a year. Duke, Georgetown, New York University, University of Chicago, even Brown, Northwestern, and Pepperdine are knocking on that six-figure door. Tuition, housing, meals, a full year of higher education now costs what used to buy a house. So here's the picture. Fewer international students paying full freight, a shrinking pool of college-age Americans, and a price tag most families can't stomach. The 1940s version of America looked at a warning about research funding and chose to double down. The 2020s version is looking at a warning about global talent and building a wall around the admissions office. Here's the irony nobody in Washington wants to confront. The students leaving aren't just tuition checks. They're the next generation of scientists, engineers, founders. The very talent pipeline that made American universities the envy of the planet in the first place. The very talent that keeps its economy moving. There's an old business rule. If you stop investing in your competitive advantage, eventually it stops being an advantage. For decades, America invested in universities, research, and most importantly, people. The world responded by sending its brightest minds to America. Now that flow is slowing, and the rest of the world is not waiting around. America spent years building the world's best talent magnet. It's now.
I'm begging you, start mastering Claude if you're in your 50s.
We're looking for people 40 plus who want to actually master Claude in 28 days. No free time needed, just 10 minutes a day.
Both. You can't gut the pipeline and keep the innovation economy running on fumes and nostalgia.
If you open any business outlet today, one question is prominently doing the rounds. Is India running out of sugar? The question sounds strange. After all, India is one of the world's biggest sugar producers. Yet something unusual is happening. Sugar prices have surged sharply over the past 2 months. The government is tightening rules. This is on how much sugar can be stored. And now, New Delhi has opened the door to imports. So what has happened to India's sugar supply? Why have prices risen so sharply? And why has the government stepped in now? Tonight, we're going to decode India's sugar squeeze. Let's start with the big picture. India is not a country that depends on imported sugar. It is one of the world's largest producers. Brazil is number one. India comes next. It produces more than 30 million tons of sugar a year, and it consumes around 28 million tons. That means the country generally produces enough sugar to meet its own domestic demand, and in a good year, it can also export the surplus. But this year, that buffer has become much tighter. Sugar prices have risen by nearly 40% in just 2 months. Retail prices of the commodity have also climbed. The average retail price was around 52.3 rupees per kilogram on the 18th of August. That is about 55 cents. That was 13% higher than a year prior. At the same time, spot sugar prices in major markets have also risen. They touched a 16-year high of 5,530 rupees per quintal, or around $58 on the 19th of August. Now, just to give you some context, a quintal is 100 kilograms. So what is driving the sudden surge? The first problem is supply. Domestic sugar production has come under pressure. It is now expected to be lower than earlier estimates. The government expects output at around 30.6 million tons. The earlier estimate was around 34.3 million tons. And weather has played a part in that shortfall. Excess rainfall and waterlogging have also damaged sugarcane in some areas. Additionally, crop diseases have also affected sugarcane. There's also the demand side. August to November in India is India's festival season. Ganesh Chaturthi, Durga Puja, Dussehra and Diwali all occur during this period. Sweets and confectionery are a major part of these celebrations. That means sugar demand typically picks up during these months. And this year, that seasonal demand is arriving just as the production outlook has weakened. So the market is entering the festive season with a much thinner supply cushion. Besides, the government has also flagged concerns over hoarding and speculation. Together, these factors have pushed prices higher. There's also the ethanol question. Some have linked the sugar price surge to India's ethanol program. The government has rejected that claim. It says ethanol diversion is not responsible for the current price rise. So what action is New Delhi taking? And it has taken more than one measure. First, New Delhi has allowed 1 million tons of raw sugar to be imported at zero duty. That is 10 lakh tons. India normally levies 100% duty on sugar imports. The import window will remain open until the 31st of October. This is the first time in nearly a decade that India has turned to sugar imports on this scale. But there's an important detail here. The government is not simply flooding the market with imported sugar. The imports are of raw sugar. Port-based refineries can bring it in, refine it into white sugar, and sell the refined product to India. Then the government is also going after stockpiling. From the 1st of September, bulk consumers using more than 10 tons of sugar a month will not be allowed to hold more than 15 days of requirements. The rule will remain in force until the 30th of November. It covers businesses such as confectioners, soft drink makers, food processors, sweet shops, and other large institutional buyers. In fact, the government has also ordered mills to provide sales data. This is to get a clearer picture of where the sugar is going. The market has already reacted to these moves. Sugar company shares fell sharply earlier today. Why? Because high sugar prices had been good for millers. They were selling sugar at soaring prices than before. But government intervention changes that equation. More imports mean more supply. Tighter stock limits can also reduce the ability to hold back on inventory. That could take some heat out of sugar prices. And that is exactly what New Delhi wants. The government's priority is not to protect a rally in sugar stocks. It is to keep the domestic market supplied, especially before this festive season. So, is India running short of sugar? No. But the buffer indeed is getting tight. And India wants to ensure that this does not become a bigger problem. Gold left the headlines a few weeks ago after a blockbuster 2025. The precious metal had a rather boring first half of the current year, but now it seems to have made a comeback. Gold is now nearing a 3-month high, rising 5% this week alone. So what is powering this rally? Falling bond yields, a weaker dollar, fears over US debt, and fresh central bank buying are all boosting gold. So can gold keep climbing? Or is this rally about to run into a wall? Here's a report.
A few weeks ago, gold looked like it had missed its moment. After briefly crossing $5,500 an ounce in January, the precious metal fell more than $1,500. But the precious yellow metal has a funny habit. Just when investors start writing its obituary, it starts writing another chapter. Gold is now close to a 3-month high, gaining around 5% this week alone, after its biggest one-day jump since early February. So what changed? For starters, US bond yields are falling. Think of bond yields as the return investors expect from lending money to the US government. When those returns fall, investors start looking elsewhere, and gold suddenly looks more attractive because gold pays no interest. The second boost is coming from the US dollar. A weak dollar makes gold cheaper for buyers using other currencies. This increases demand. Then comes another important signal. The US Treasury announced it would double the size of its buyback operations for long-term government bonds, particularly those maturing in 10 to 30 years. In simple terms, the Treasury is stepping in to buy more of these bonds, hoping to improve liquidity and help bring down borrowing costs. That gave gold another tailwind. Why? As the Treasury buys more bonds, the prices would increase. Higher bond prices generally result in lower yield. And as mentioned earlier, a lower bond yield helps gold. But there's a bigger story underneath this rally: debt, inflation, and fear. Investors are increasingly worried about the sheer level of US government debt. And when confidence in fiscal discipline gets shaky, gold starts looking less like jewelry and more like insurance. There is also a technical trigger. Gold has moved back above its 200-day moving average. Essentially, a long-term trend line traders watch to decide whether an asset is generally moving up or down. Crossing it has attracted fresh buying, but don't mistake a rally for a guarantee. Gold still has a formidable enemy: bond yields. The 30-year US government bond yield is sitting around a 19-year high, while inflation-adjusted long-term yields are testing their strongest level since the global financial crisis. And this matters because of something called opportunity cost. If a government bond gives you a juicy return, holding gold means giving up that income. Gold just sits there. It doesn't send you an interest check. So the higher bond yields go, the more investors have to ask, why hold gold when I can earn more elsewhere? For decades, that relationship has generally pushed gold and yields in opposite directions. But central banks have complicated the old rulebook. The World Gold Council's 2026 Central Bank Gold Reserve Survey says 89% of central banks expect global gold reserves to increase over the next year, while a record 45% expect to increase their own holdings. That is a serious vote of confidence. Central banks want to diversify away from over-reliance on traditional reserve assets. And that demand can create a floor under gold when prices fall. So where does gold go from here? Watch 3 things. The Federal Reserve. Any change in expectations for interest rate cuts could move gold sharply. The dollar and bond yields. Continued weakness could keep pushing gold higher. A sudden rebound could trigger profit taking. And geopolitics. the war in West Asia. If diplomacy lowers oil prices and inflation fears, falling yields could actually help gold. But if gold risk appetite improves dramatically, some investors may abandon gold's safe haven appeal. And that is the strange position gold finds itself in. It benefits from fear. It benefits from central bank buying. It benefits from a weaker dollar. But it still has to fight the world's favorite alternative investment, government debt. So the gold rally is not simply about shiny metal getting expensive again. It is a referendum on what investors fear more, missing out on returns or losing trust in the system that promises those returns. And right now, gold is betting that fear still has plenty of fuel left.
Okay, to weigh in on the last couple of segments, first the student, declining international student numbers. This is one of the policies. While I do support Trump on some of his policies, this is one of the policies I don't agree with him on. I don't think it's sensible to create a policy that alienates smart students. I think there could be policies created that sets conditional contracts for students coming into the country so that maybe they have to give the first 10 years of their income, a percentage of their income back to the U.S. based on the fact that student visas are being granted to them. So irrespective of where they go to work, whether they stay in the U.S. and work here or they go abroad to work in their native countries or elsewhere, the U.S. should still be able to tax them for a percentage of time while they go abroad. That way we recoup on the investment of allowing them to come in versus, not allowing them to come in. And now you're losing on some of the great potential minds that could be useful in helping to advance your country. I don't believe that that's the way to do it. There are other ways that I think should have been explored. While I do understand the sentiment that they do come and take over some of the jobs that are available locally by U.S. companies, and therefore that alienates some of the population, the native population. If you're trying to solve that problem, I do think there should be an allocated amount of students that gets allowed to work, or you should put more constraints on the companies and not so much to hire locally, just as much as you hire external students that comes in to get an education. But at the same time, I think there's other measures that can be used as opposed to just saying they can't come in, because what happens is other countries gladly take some of the more brilliant minds. They build industry, they build and advance brands in those countries. And in the end, we get left with the shorter end of the stick. The next story, I think, had to do with some stuff pertaining to India's sugar production. I think there's shortages everywhere in the world right now in light of this war. And I don't know what effect that's going to have on the rest of the world. But I would imagine that there will be a down stream of shortages to come as this war expands. So it's my hope we get it resolved quicker rather than later. Let's jump to the next story.
For years, the big tech companies have been chasing the next great breakthrough. Now they believe they've found it: artificial intelligence. Meta is betting big on it. Microsoft is chasing it too. Google and Apple are chasing their own share. And each company is pouring billions of dollars into that race. But now something unexpected is happening. The companies trying to get ahead are also finding themselves depending on each other. Meta.
If you're running your own business, you need Symphony.
Own AI powerhouse. It is developing its own models, building data centers, and spending heavily to create the infrastructure it needs. Yet, when Meta needs more computing power, it is turning to Microsoft. You heard it right. The same Microsoft that Meta is competing with for a share of the AI market. A new report is out. It claims Meta is now spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year. For what? To access AI models through the Microsoft Azure. That is Microsoft's cloud computing business. It allows companies to rent huge amounts of computing power instead of building all of that capacity themselves. This computing power is critical for AI. Models need massive amounts of computing to develop and run them. Meta is reportedly using trillions of AI tokens every week through Azure. Let me simplify that for you. Stay with us. A token is simply a small unit of information that an AI system processes. For text-based AI, a token can be maybe a word or a punctuation mark. So when we say Meta is using trillions of tokens, it means its AI systems are processing enormous amounts of information. Now, both Meta and Microsoft have declined to comment, but the scale of the reported spending shows the scale of computing power Meta is using. Still, this is not its only connection to Microsoft. Microsoft also runs a marketplace called Foundry. It brings AI models from different providers onto one platform. Companies can then access those models without having to build every single one themselves. Foundry had 100,000 customers as of July, and many of its biggest customers are actually tech companies. ByteDance has generally been the biggest spender. Adobe and Perplexity are also among its major customers. Meta is now one of the biggest customers too, and this does not mean Mark Zuckerberg has given up on building his own technology. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The company continues to develop its own models, but it is also buying access to models from other companies. That gives its developers more options based on performance, availability, and cost. Its engineers have also used OpenAI technology through Foundry. This is to assess the performance of their own models. So the strategy is not either or. It is building its own systems while using other systems where they make sense. But here's the thing. Zuckerberg has a much bigger ambition. He does not want his company to simply use artificial intelligence. He wants it to help shape how the technology is built. That is why he's pushed open-weight models. The idea is fairly simple. Developers can download the models, run the systems themselves, and modify them for their own purposes. Zuckerberg's vision is that these systems will eventually become part of everyday life, helping people work, create, learn, and communicate. And he does not want that future to be controlled by only a few companies.
We're also working to make sure that everyone has a personal superintelligence agent that works 24/7 on your behalf to improve your health, your relationships, your career, your finances, and more.
Well, that's a nice vision to have, but attempting to make it a reality has come at a huge cost. Meta's free cash flow fell 91% in the second quarter. That is the money left after a company pays its operating costs and investments. The drop shows how much cash is being absorbed by the company's spending. Zuckerberg has made it clear that he is preparing to keep investing. He believes the long-term opportunity will justify the cost. His rival, Microsoft, is already seeing returns. The tech giant is already making money from the demand created by the AI boom. Azure grew 43% in the most recent quarter. Microsoft also says more than 30 million people pay for its AI assistant. It's called Copilot. So Microsoft has already turned part of its AI investment into revenue. Meta is still spending to build the business it wants in the future. And that difference is central to the story. Zuckerberg wants Meta to build its own AI ecosystem. But today, Microsoft is one of the companies helping him build it. That is the paradox at the heart of this race. The two companies are fighting for the same future, but they cannot always build that future alone.
With this particular story, I think there's a few other factors that didn't get mentioned. Right now, Facebook, Meta, they're currently being sued by like 32 states for what I guess some of the states are saying, targeting young adults in a manner that is programming them and causing them to have anxiety and things of that nature. And so that case may set a precedence for what happens, especially with this whole AI trend and how some of these social media companies develop their software, whether or not it's predatory in terms of how kids consume it. Now, that being said, that does not take anything away from their research and development and opportunities that they're taking to expand their brand and just to get ahead of this AI trend. It's true. Microsoft does seem to have a lead here because their Copilot product, AI product, is pretty good, actually. I'd have to say it's very good as a person who uses it. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of collaboration between brands to help kind of advance the whole AI movement. Although the verdict is still out as to whether or not AI is going to be good for the economy and the society as a whole or bad. But it is nonetheless something that's definitely happening. So I think companies are doing their best they can to get ahead of it so that they can carve out some market share and make an impact.
Let's talk about the influencer economy, where your side hustle may have become a full-time job you don't get paid for. It's the big 2-6. And there is perhaps no career advice more aggressively cheerful and tempting than you should start a YouTube channel. Let's be honest. How many of you have actually considered taking up being an influencer or a creator full-time? We get it. The allure is undeniable. Feeling bored? Start a YouTube channel. Hate your job? Become a creator. Have a niche interest in vintage thrift finds? Great. There's an underserved audience waiting for your content. It's a convincing elevator pitch. You have a phone, you have a personality, you have the internet. What are you waiting for? But here's what you probably do not realize. Somewhere between just post consistently and link in bio, you would have just started a media company where you are the CEO, producer, writer, camera person, and everything else in between, at least initially. And if all goes well and you get more people on board, that's where the grind actually begins, where you're lying awake at 2 a.m. wondering why Tuesday's reel got 800 views when Monday's got 11K. That is not a hobby anymore. The money there is real. US creator advertising spending hit an estimated $37 billion in 2025, up 26% in a single year. As per reports, it is expected to reach $44 billion in 2026. Some reports estimate the global influencer marketing industry was at roughly $32.6 billion in 2025. And India is getting in on the action too. According to a Boston Consulting Group report titled From Content to Commerce, Mapping India's Creator Economy, India has nearly 2.5 million monetized digital creators, influencing $350 to $400 billion in annual consumer spending. So yes, there is money in posting yourself online. The creator economy is booming, but the average creator is not necessarily booming with it. Goldman Sachs estimated that only around 4% of the global creators qualify as professionals earning more than $100,000 a year. And newer creator income research paints an even more unequal picture. Creator IQ found that among 14,400 creators receiving brand or agency payments in 2025, the average payment was $11,400, while the median was just $3,000. So here's what that tells you. Some influencers are absolutely making a killing. That does not mean that influencer is you. The great illusion of influencing is that we mostly just see the winners. What we don't see is the graveyard of forgotten channels and abandoned accounts. The creator economy has a classic winner takes a lot problem. Creator IQ found that top 10% of creators captured 62% of creator payments in 2025. And isn't that the internet's favorite trick? Making you feel like you're the idiot for still having a job. The Interactive Advertising Bureau says brands use creators not just for awareness, but for increasingly sales and conversions. In its 2025 research, 43% of brands cited awareness as a goal, 41% reaching new audiences, 35% reputation and trust, and 32% online sales. The influencer is essentially a walking advertising channel. And the emotional relationship you've spent months, maybe even years building, has been handed over to the marketing department of Protein Powder Private Limited. And this is the genius of influencer advertising. The ad does not interrupt that relationship. The relationship becomes the ad. And here comes the first dark trade-off. Influencers are paid for authenticity, but the moment authenticity becomes your business model, authenticity becomes labor. Your personality now has a content calendar. A 2025 survey cited by The Guardian found 50% of creators has experienced burnout. 37% considered quitting. This might be the strangest employment relationship in modern capitalism. The platforms owe you absolutely nothing, yet they are the ones deciding which videos perform and which do not. The platform is not going to pay you for existing. And the economics can get especially murky for smaller creators who may feel pressure to accept barter deals, because turning down a brand can feel like turning down validation. But a free lipstick will not pay your bills. A free tab will not buy the groceries. Your electricity company remains stubbornly old-fashioned. It wants actual money. Your audience is not really yours. This is another inconvenient truth. You may have 500,000 followers, but you do not own 500,000 relationships. You have access to an audience on someone else's platform, and that distinction is important. A platform can change its algorithm. It can change the monetization rules. Influencing isn't just posting a product and collecting a check. Advertising regulators increasingly require creators to clearly disclose commercial relationships. In India, the same broader principle applies. And here's the point we're trying to make. Don't confuse the possibility of success with the probability of success. There is absolutely money to be made. The darkest trade-off of the influencer economy isn't that you might fail to become famous. It's that you might succeed so spectacularly that you are now the product. That is when the side hustle has officially hustled you.
Okay, that was the last segment. As you could see, the influencer market is a growing market. And to be honest, I kind of disagree with her point of view on that. Look, we're in an economy where industry is changing, technology is expanding, and people are finding more and more effective means to make money. And if you do have some sort of personality or charm, you can leverage your personality to bring attention to brands and different products and to start a channel. Now, hopefully your channel is helpful and you can draw an audience. That's sort of the biggest challenge. And with some dedication, you can get there. But it's true, there are people that if they're not going there for the right reasons, that they'll burn out and they won't necessarily meet the metrics necessary to even make money on the platform. But to each his own. I mean, I say go for it. I started my channel after reading a book, the YouTube algorithm, I think it was, or the YouTube formula, and following a few mentors that mentioned it, and they were instrumental in my decision. And to be honest, I don't regret it. I'm going to continue to press forward and present good content, and we'll see where it all goes. But that being said, I do think that people are realizing that the 9-to-5 grind isn't always as rewarding. Meanwhile, their children who love to play video games on Twitch are millionaires, right? Because they figured out something that wasn't necessarily taught to our parents. So I think it's a changing economy, a changing trend, and that the technology is there to make things easier for us to make a living. And I think people are, in search of that. All right, that's it for me. Thank you guys for joining me. As always, I appreciate your attention, your support. I ask that you like and subscribe and stay connected to the channel by liking and subscribing the button below. But also, I ask that you weigh in on the various segments that was covered today, and also, you know, any point of view that you think was not brought to the forefront. Feel free to share it with the audience. All right, guys, until we speak again, God bless, and y'all be well.